Hey everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. The city so dumb, they named it once. It's a close rhyme. How is everyone doing? As I don't know if you're in quarantine like I am, but it is day 328. And you know what? I'm hanging in there. I'm the embodiment of that poster of that cat. So today, very good episode. Today's guest is Francis Quinlan. If you don't know who they are, let me read you their bio right now. Raised mainly in Boyertown, Pennsylvania, solo artist and principal songwriter of the band Hopalong, Francis Quinlan recorded their first album as Hopalong during their freshman year of college at the Maryland Institute College of Art. Hopalong soon became a full band, and with their third album, Painted Shut, the group signed to Saddle Creek. Their fourth album, Bark Your Head Off Dog, was met with near universal acclaim, I agree, and just 1 year ago, right before the pandemic, the label released Francis' solo album, Likewise, which is absolutely wonderful. Yes, folks, we are celebrating 1 year anniversaries of things in the pandemic, in quarantine. The surreality is non-stop. But I love this. I loved talking to Francis. And we recorded this back in, I think about the middle of December. And one of the topics we talk about a lot was gender and gender roles, and especially how that relates to the music industry a little bit, which, if you're a longtime listener of the show, you know is something I talk about a lot. You know, my theory on this is that if you are an honest artist, then your identity is reflected in the art you make. So I think it's important to discuss these topics. And while we were talking, I got the feeling that Francis was grappling with these things. But I didn't want to make them talk about it if Francis didn't bring it up first. I didn't want to push them. And I'm only mentioning it now in this intro because Francis came out as non-binary a few weeks ago. I think towards the end of January. And I think that viewing our discussion in light of that helps give it some context. Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting talk. I mean, it's interesting for many reasons. You know, I love Francis's music so much, and as a fellow child of Pennsylvania, I am, maybe out of a narcissistic impulse, very interested in how the culture of the state forms people. So I hope you enjoy this talk. And you know what? Go get Likewise on Bandcamp, or go get it wherever it puts the most money in Francis's pockets. By the way, if this is your first time listening to Beginnings, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you want to hear other episodes, the last 100 are on whatever podcast app you're listening to, though I think they're all there on Spotify, and all the MP3s are there on beginnings.libsyn.com if you want to download those instead. I have been doing this show for over 10 years, and I have talked to hundreds of writers and musicians and artists and thinkers. I mean, just recently on the show, Mary Timony and Ian Mackay were on. Those were two great episodes. Who else? A.C. Newman. That was a long time ago, but I think that was pretty good. He played music on the show, too. So, if you want to subscribe to the show, you can do that on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Amazon, Google, the aforementioned Spotify. And you can follow me on social media at Andy Beckerman on both Instagram and Twitter. Amazing episodes coming up. I just did 2 separate talks with the principal guys behind Chavez, Matt Sweeney and Clay Tarver. Bob Nastanovich from Pavement coming up, Tobin Sprout. If you like comic books, Chip Zdarsky, that was really good. So stay tuned, stay healthy, And now let's talk to Francis. I'm excited to talk to you for a number of reasons. One of them, unless you want to start weird, I have a weird thought to start with, or we can start with normal stuff, and then.
Well, just really quick before we start, I just want to say, in going through your interviews, I was so pumped that you interviewed Diane Cluck. I'm a huge fan of hers. I love that song, "Easy to Be Around."
Yeah,
that's O'Neal, right?
Yes.
And she does that. Do you know that song she does with Jeffrey Lewis, "The River"?
I don't think I do.
Oh man, I will send that your way. It is such. I mean, it definitely makes me think of 2004, or 2005, I guess. Not that anyone cares, but
no.
Very
okay.
fondly.
I have actually from this very thing. I have about 30 things to unpack. But one of them is actually like the thing that I was thinking of, like the weird parentheses. Diane Cluck, a child of Pennsylvania. I am a child of Pennsylvania. You are a child of Pennsylvania. There's connective tissue there I would like to talk about at some point.
Yeah, me too.
End parentheses. When I was like looking up your like biographical information last night, I was listening to the last Hopalong album. And for some reason, during One That Suits Me, I had this like weird, visceral feeling of time.
Interesting.
I was trying to think of how to like, because I'm like, I've been in therapy for 7 years, so I've learned how to, if I'm having a feeling, pay attention to it and try to figure it out. And I was thinking about like, do you ever read Slaughterhouse-Five, that Kurt Vonnegut book?
The only Vonnegut book I've read is Breakfast of Champions. But it's cool to hear that reference. And by the way, I just started, I've been in therapy before, but I just started for real this year. And I don't know if this happened in your first year, but there's just all these doors being opened for which I was not prepared. And I'm not sorry they've been open, but they cannot be closed now. It's happening in a few. And having this time to process therapy too.
They can't be. Well, they can be closed if you work on repression.
Oh, true.
But if you are dutifully doing the work of therapy, then they can't be closed. But you can always keep that hope. You can always regress if you want to.
Do you find in therapy now though that without at least I assume in our case, I want to be careful. I'm realizing more and more how privileged my own experience is. I mean, I understand being a white person. I'm certainly carry privilege with me, but I hadn't really considered. I mean, not enough. Like I worked at a restaurant the other day, DJing like outside at this place where I've worked before, and I haven't been back in the restaurant biz in some time, and it was jarring. I mean, it was nice to not just be in my house on my own as I have been. However, it occurred to me how so many people aren't necessarily getting any time to process what's going on right now. And this happens to me too, where I have a train of thought and it just totally goes somewhere else. But just to say that, I guess what I was asking is, are you finding now with this freedom from distraction, let's say, to a larger extent, that sessions are kind of hitting closer or more intensely? Or, I mean, you're 7 years, you're a veteran.
Yeah, I think by this point I've done a lot of the work, and it's more about, I mean, two things. One is that like I've found that like in quarantine that things that I don't have a lot of extra time. I spend more time like cleaning groceries. Even though I know that it's a low percentage chance, a very low percentage chance that you could possibly get coronavirus from groceries. I still am like, it's still a percentage chance, even if it's like 0.02. I don't want to take that 0.02. But
Wow.
like,
Yeah. I hear you.
a lot of time cleaning, a lot of time just going into mental health maintenance so that I don't go off the deep end. That the actual like the maintenance of like keeping myself buoyed leaves very little time for the actual work. So I don't know if if it's the same for me, but I also, the second thing is like, I did a lot of stuff. I did a lot of the exploratory stuff years ago. And so now a lot of it is just like paying attention to the emotions and then doing the work at that in the moment of noticing what that emotion is and being like, why am I feeling this? Okay, well, what does that mean? And now I have to, like, a lot of my stuff was like, and this will go into some of the stuff about Pennsylvania because I'm curious if this was your experience, but like I found Pennsylvania to be a very kind of like Protestant-ish place in terms of like being emotionally not repressed necessarily, but like you don't talk about emotions. It's improper in some way, even though no one said that. It felt like you just don't talk about those things with people. And so I spent a lot of time in my life not paying attention to those emotions. Only in adulthood have I started to really, because I'm also curious if this impacted, I found that like I write better scripts. I write better characters being emotionally aware.
Interesting.
I don't know if that's the same for you. If like do you think you write better songs or you write better lyrics or you're more in touch with the music if you are emotionally aware of things?
Well, I do think the fact that being raised a female, I was, if anything, I'm wondering if my emotions were not encroached on, but I was assumed to be emotional a lot as growing up, and I guess I was, but I think I was also in that sense allowed access to my emotions that perhaps individuals raised as boys were denied. Like I wonder if that for a lot of Pennsylvania and honestly across the nation, men might feel that lack of access to their own emotions. And therapy's fantastic for that. Actually, my therapist has really been teaching me about boundaries. So more so that my emotions aren't, that my identity is not anyone else's property, which is something that, one would think that's an obvious thing to know. But I did not realize, especially getting into this is separate perhaps, but the more serious my band got about the music business, it didn't occur to me how much of this identity of femininity that I was, I guess, opting into. Anyway, I'm kind of getting off of what you're saying, perhaps. But
tell me what you're comfortable or not comfortable talking about. But like, I do think, I see this a lot. There is especially in any kind of like, whether it's film or TV or music, there is this kind of like, the people who run it are usually wealthy white people who subscribe to kind of cultural norms, especially binaries, right? So it is either male or female. There's nothing in between. And if you are a woman, especially I think in music, especially like when it comes to like publicity and stuff like that, you are forced into a mold of traditional femininity.
It's certainly, it's certainly demanded. I've come to appreciate more the people who have artists and musicians and activists and writers, I mean, it goes, across the board. People who have, oh my goodness, my vocabulary. People have pushed against those expectations and found success, or, I mean, perhaps later on. I just got into, well, when quarantine started, one of my friends recommended the show Pose to me.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
And, oh my God, that show blew my mind. And thinking of somebody like Billy Porter, who I think started out, I think he was definitely up against it for a long time. And the fact that he has made it through and makes incredible work and inspires people. And I mean, that's another thing that I'm even just getting time to really think about what success means. Because I don't know if I posted this recently. The same friend that recommended Pose to me, we were talking about, I guess, linguistics. There was a point in time, and I still would like to, where I wanted to pick up a book that I would actually read on linguistics. But I looked up the word success, and there's multiple definitions, sure. But the first definition is achieving an aim or goal. The second definition is achieving, or someone who achieves money and fame. And I'm thinking, like, that's not the same. Like, how can you, there's plenty of people who don't want to be famous at all. And then I guess it comes from this Latin term that means any outcome. It's like, well, that's just what? Huh? I mean, I posted about it. So, I mean, it's definitely something I've been obsessing over.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's, there's a lot, like, especially when you start doing this professionally, whatever this is, in whatever your art is, for me, like TV, or for you, music, everything starts to become conflated, right? It's no longer like success. And you have to start asking yourself, is success for me just doing the things I want to do? Is it having professional recognition? Is it having public recognition? Or to what degree? Is it having public recognition to the accept, like, even no matter what I make? Like, if I make something that sucks, but people still love it, or something that, not that sucks, but something that I don't like, that it's not up to my own standards, but people still love it. Is that success still? Is it worth it to compromise to have success, or at what level is the compromise destroying the intent of the thing you're making? Like, I've always, and I've been kind of lucky, at the same time unlucky, but like my wife and I, a lot of the projects that we've done, we've had the luck of of being able to, like, if someone's asking us to compromise more than we're comfortable with, of walking away. I mean, it's always been very difficult, especially when like contracts are involved, but we have been able to walk away from certain things where people have asked us to compromise more than to compromise, to the point where the thing no longer is what we wanted to make in the first place.
Sure.
And I think all those things, I think it's a real mind fuck, like all those things, like swirling around in your head, like, especially like when also, I mean, I don't know about you, but like we support ourselves. Our bills are dependent upon us making things and selling them, like being able to put cat food in our cats' mouths.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not this, it's not a hobby. I mean, although hobbies do get dissed a little more than they should. Hobbies are healthy. However, I do hear what you're saying. Absolutely.
Sorry, go on.
Oh no, well, I mean, to your point about knowing when to say no, I wondered, as we're talking, if perhaps for many, I mean, lots of people, just having social media, having the technology that we have now, perhaps we're all dealing with new settings of boundaries. that just because we have this technology and this ability to connect does not mean that we should be, I mean, accessed at all times, certainly. And also, it's really strange watching the marketing of identity in this way. I mean, like I remember hearing I think it was This American Life. It was a couple of years ago, maybe, where there were these teenagers talking about branding themselves.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, I thought that was, publicist talk. Like, and they're.
Oh yeah, no. There's like I remember like very distinctly. There was a point where I made some joke. It's not a good joke, but like I made some joke about like, you used to see like band notices like looking for a drummer and a bassist like on a telephone pole with little like tear offs with phone numbers.
Sure.
That like somewhere in the mid 2000s they started to say, looking for a bass player, looking for a drummer, looking for a manager, looking for a publicist. Like that became part and parcel of the professionalization of music. Like there was a point in our life. I'm not that much older than you, but like there's a point where it like I was a teenager in the 90s, and the idea of selling out was an anathema. It was just so against the idea of like making music or indie rock or whatever. And then there was this big switch over somewhere in the like mid aughts.
I mean, don't you think that's also, I mean, I remember, I hear you on that. But it's funny thinking, I mean, I remember, I listened to the radio up until high school. I did not, I didn't go to my local record store was FYE. I mean, it wasn't, I didn't go to the cool spots. I just wasn't aware. And I remember thinking of integrity. It is interesting seeing the young perception changing and just like, yeah, you got to make money and everyone wants to be, not everyone. It's so, I don't want to sound judgmental or something, but there weren't influencers at that time, certainly. And what I mean to say is that there was a young ideology of selling out and not selling out. But then you read books like, what was it called? Our Noise, the Merge book.
Oh yeah.
I think it's called Our Noise. Anyway, they're talking about getting by and, selling out of Arcade Fire records and stuff and wanting to be successful as a label while still having it's interesting. I think that whole not selling out thing was a mindset of anyone that wasn't pressing records and,
mm-hmm.
Dealing with the actual industry.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah.
Again, I think like it was such an oppressive kind of ideology in the 90s that I don't think that it left room for these kind of questions like, well, it's okay to be successful as long as you also keep your integrity. Like you can be successful. There are plenty of musicians that I love they have become successful and I love their music still because they didn't betray whatever that was that I enjoyed when they were, on Barsuck Records or whatever, whatever small label, they are still the same band or they still have the same emotions. They still are honest about their emotions in the way they were when they were smaller. And I think that to me, it's the question of integrity more than anything else. Like, are you staying true to yourself, whatever that means?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I guess I'm also forgetting that at that time, what you had to compare it to was MTV and mainstream radio. There wasn't this gradient, and there weren't anyone who was recording in their bedroom was the anomaly, like of Montreal or something. Certainly. I mean, I remember the first home recorded album I heard was a Bright Eyes album. I think it was Letting Off the Happiness. And my mind was blown that you could even do that. So I guess I also am just forgetting what people even meant when they said selling out, because I guess they did mean signing to a major label.
Yeah. Which is
Which is
like, what's the big, as long as you are not betraying yourself when you do it.
absolutely. And I mean, it's so funny the rules I set for myself as to even when I started recording all the things that I didn't want to sound like. And even in the last, I've let go of this somewhat, but there was just such a long period of time where I was against reverb. I mean, and then realizing that some of my favorite albums have reverb on them. I mean, it's all about subtlety, and how funny it is to have rules. I mean, it's just it's so square. It's a square.
I have two questions. One, have you figured out this idea of success? Have you like been able to like suss out what you are looking for or what it means to you to be successful? Or is it still something that you're kind of grappling with at the moment?
That is something that I am really I don't know that I was paying real attention to it before. I certainly was looking for validation. Absolutely. And success was certainly tied very much to validation from the outside.
Oh yeah.
And it's been such a I am grateful for the career I've been able to have in music, because I mean, I'm I don't know how lucky, perhaps everyone was just making a good decision, but I sent out I made a full length when I was 19 called freshman year, and I was still in college. I mean, I just finished my first year in college. And I sent that to 4 labels. I either sent that one to 4 labels or the one even before that. And maybe, I don't know, one of my first 2 CDs that I made, I sent to 4 labels. It was Saddle Creek, Arts and Crafts, Merge, and Jade Tree.
Good choice.
And yeah, nobody responded. Kind of strange. I mean, isn't Arts and Craft like a Canadian label or something?
Is that the one that Apples and Stereo was on?
It's the one that Broken Social Scene was on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I picked them, because I liked Broken Social Scene. But I didn't get a response from anybody except for Saddle Creek. They sent me a little postcard saying, sorry, we got inundated. I mean, like, this was a year, it either was the year of or the year after I'm Wide Awake came out. So they were just totally inundated, I would think. A lot of high school / early college demos. But yeah, I mean, so basically I was crushed. I was like, I sent it to 4, and so I just immediately gave up and pressed it myself and toured, booking it myself with friends using MySpace.
Mm-hmm.
It's always funny it's funny when I talk to older musicians who just show one of my friends was talking about how he would just show up in a city and just find a venue where his band could play and, I guess hang out in Minneapolis for a couple nights and play.
Or there's even like people who are like, yeah, we just went to the back of Maximum Rock and Roll and looked through all the contacts to like find venues and stuff like that.
That's what I was asking him. I was like, did you because he's, he was in a punk band, and I asked, did you have a zine that you subscribed to, or, what have you? And it sounded like they would have one show booked in some city and just go towards that and see where they could play along the way, off the cuff. And then he was talking about how they had the map with the, oh man, somebody's dad got a map that had an index kind of situation that you could sort of, I'm totally butchering.
No, I remember those days. The day when we, I used to be in a very small band, but we did a tour, and this is before smartphones. So we had an atlas, and to go, when we were driving from Philly to Boston, or from Philly to New York and New York to Boston, we just opened up the atlas and we're like, all right, just drive up this. I remember just like looking at a map and being like, I guess we just go this way. And then You have to sit there and like be very vigilant looking for the exit.
It's funny to think now, like I used MapQuest and didn't consider
and printed out the directions.
By the way, can I swear? Is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead.
When you look at fucking MapQuest, it's just a printout of it's a list.
Uh-huh.
And if you mess that up and you don't know where you are, it's actually kind of a step backwards from a map. It's really not. It becomes useless kind of quickly.
Yeah, it's a recipe.
It really is. Yeah. So I've definitely, it's funny I guess what I was trying to say is just like, I've had this, feel free to edit this, like, because I take a long time to say anything. And, but yeah, so I would tour on my own with MapQuest directions, tour with, usually one friend. We would, like my first tour was with my friend Dom, who I had just met. I'd met him at a show that he was playing, and he just, I was putting out freshman year, and he said, let's go on a tour together. And my mom said, you're going with who? I mean, she like wanted me at the time to bring my boyfriend with me, who I'd only known for a few months longer. But it's so funny. The rules that you realize later is like, those rules are kind of flimsy,
Oh, yeah. Well, most of the rules of society are really flimsy when you actually start digging down any deeper than the surface. And you're like, oh, wait, why do I follow this?
Well, and with young people of what length of time is a long time to know somebody, how 6 months really beats out 2 is, it's funny.
Well, whatever they can hold on to be like, to tell themselves like my kid is safe, I'm sure is just like, well, she's known her boyfriend for 6 months, so that must be safe.
That's true. And he'd been to the house and met my folks. So
they've broken bread together.
Yes. But yeah, we went on our first tour together. And I remember the big show on that tour was at a punk house in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I think we sort of booked around that show. But anyway, this is such a long answer that I don't even remember what the question was. But the fact that I didn't get signed, that I didn't prescribe to any, I mean, I didn't have to think about, because back then I used to cut my hair really short. I mean, not that that's weird at all. It wasn't even that weird back then, but I really had access to myself. I had agency in this way that I think if I jumped into the music business early somehow at that point in time even in the early 2000s, like I mean, even now women still, I certainly have come to see how I've, even at the ripe age of whatever, 5 years, like 29, that I wasn't quite prepared for what I was signing on to.
Oh yeah.
Getting a publicist and trying to be, I mean, like the first time we were videotaped, which was 2015, videotaped.
On a VHS tape.
On a VHS, it came out great. But yeah, having all that freedom to mess up, to tour, to build my own narrative and not have someone telling me what that narrative was supposed to be was an immense gift. Because freshman year basically I'm saying all this because freshman year turned 15 this summer in August. And when I announced that and did a live stream and put it on streaming, it was incredible. The response I got from people who saw me like 15 years ago and the people that I met 15 years ago, the women I met in school and people who set up shows for me, how that support was still intact. I mean, not the same, but it's the fact that is still there, having nothing to do with, I don't think, business or, I still wouldn't consider myself a buzzy musician by any means. I don't think that really ever happened. And it was so humbling to see that people still care about something I made such a long time ago with no backing of major label or booking agent or publicist or manager.
Yeah. I mean, it came out of a community though. And I think I've seen in comedy or when I was in music, I was in Pittsburgh when I was in a band, and like Pittsburgh has such a welcoming, open, even it's such a diverse, weird music scene, but like everyone like plays the same shows together. Still, yeah, the Mr. Roboto project, like people are still playing. Yeah, it's a great place.
Yeah.
And it's open to like plenty, like from like hardcore and punk to like weird experimental stuff. It's pretty open. Anyone can, it's a community space. And I think music or art in general that comes out of a community first and then is inserted into the kind of like business world. There is something, because I want to say like there's something more real, but I don't really mean that. I just think it makes stronger connections, or it comes out of stronger connections, and it can last. You can keep your integrity longer or forever.
Well, it moves at its own pace, right? I mean, people are meeting who they have the capacity to meet. You're not getting, flooded necessarily with, although perhaps it was different. Yeah. I mean, once MySpace came around, I'm sure there were houses that were getting swamped with messages of just like, can my band?
Yeah. But I mean, did you think that allowed you, having had that time to like grow into yourself? It allowed you to, again, I'm going back to this idea of like, that there is a very like business world, mainstream, hegemonic understanding of femininity that can get pushed onto you, as opposed to it coming from if that's how you feel inside, great, but if that's not how you feel inside, but you feel like you have to play to that because that's what the business world, this kind of just like very traditional conservative, like business is very traditional conservative in identity, even as they like pretend that they are like quote unquote woke. Really, they do believe in this kind of 1950s version of race, gender, sexuality. And if you don't feel that inside, I think it can be difficult sometimes. And that's why, like, when, I go back to this, what you said earlier, and I'm like, I am still curious, like, do you think that allowed you to like resist that, or is it still kind of like a force that you have to reckon with?
Unfortunately, that issue of women being socialized by this culture that doesn't really know even how to speak to the experience of women. I mean, women have been treated as an accessory for so long, and we're just beginning to get beyond that and starting to, equal pay is still an issue throughout many professions. And it only occurred, I did not realize how, I grew up, it's only recently occurred to me that I grew up and spent my life up until now looking at myself through the gaze of men. I did not realize that was going on. And it wasn't until we got in the music business officially, I suppose, and started to be reviewed and assessed by these. On the one hand, it's wonderful. I'm grateful that our band has gotten as far as we have, that we've been introduced to people that otherwise would not have heard us. It's wonderful to have had those, the opportunities that we have, but I did start to feel a narrowing of how much like myself I could feel, even though that was something I already was struggling with. That's a big part of why I realized I love visual art so much. In visual art and painting, which is what I went to school for and what I grew up doing longer. I've been painting longer than I've been making music and writing songs. It didn't occur to me until very recently that part of why I love painting and drawing so much, and in the beginning writing too, but that changed over the years, is that my gender does not come into play at all in my paintings and my drawings. No one ever talks about how I'm looking. I mean, I'm not in the photo. It's just the work. I've always wanted, and I realized when I was younger, I didn't want to read women authors. I myself, I mean, you know, this has been going on for years, that I've been sort of unpacking my own sexism. Like, that's how deeply rooted it is. It's something that I think we're all forced in some way to reckon with. But no, to answer your question from ages ago, I didn't really, I was trying to, I guess, be successful. But it's funny, at the time, my idea of success was really just bands that I was comparing myself to. And the funny thing is, I've been fortunate enough to meet some of my heroes over the years. And then you find out that they're people, and they're not people without problems. They're human beings. And that's not a slight against anyone. I think we just have this, we mythologize fame. We mythologize, and glamorize and romanticize artists and music, you know, anybody that, and everyone should have a chance to do something that everyone should get to have a job that they feel they can stand behind and feel like they're in the right place doing what they should be doing. I think a lot of people don't get access to that. And I think that that's very unfair. I mean, I was really lucky to be told it occurs to me, the more people I meet who, and some of them, you know, break through this, and that's amazing. But there's a lot of people that I've encountered, especially in middle school, high school, who are either told that they're not talented, or told to be realistic, and just at a young age forced into this reality because of these authority figures telling them so. I mean, it's crazy, the gnarly stuff that guidance counselors have said throughout the decades to kids. It's insane to me.
I mean, did you have this experience, like when you were growing up? Did you? I read that you grew up both in New Jersey and in Quakertown, which is just like, Quakertown's just an hour from Reading, where I grew up, and like, what was your experience, you know, with authority figures? I think, because this is like, I think authority and our relationship, a person's relationship with authority, is kind of like is one of these like early things that shape who we become as people. And I'm kind of curious about your own. Where did you grow up mostly? Or like, where was your childhood mostly, and what was your relationship to authority there?
Well, I'll get personal with you. So first of all, I mean, to your point, I mean, I agree absolutely that authority figures for so many of us absolutely have helped shape us. Even if we know to rebel at a young age, that's still an effect. So I grew up for 10 years in North Jersey, and then my parents divorced, and my mom reconnected with a man that she knew back in high school, and he's wonderful, my stepdad. And so then we moved in with him. So that was 6th grade that my brother Mark and I moved to Pennsylvania with my mom, and it's not quite Quakertown, and it's a really small town. I went to Boyertown High School.
Yeah, I know Boyertown.
Oh God. Yeah.
That's even closer to Reading.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah, Boyertown. Lots of flea markets in my life. Zern's was very nearby.
Yeah. Wait, where was the Green Dragon? Was that near you?
Green Dragon.
Yeah, that was a huge flea market.
Oh no, I'm not familiar with that one. So we did go to Q Mart in Quakertown. We'd go to Q Mart. I'm from a town called Perkiomenville, which had the Perkiomenville sale.
422 is Perkiomen Avenue that goes through. I grew up in the suburbs of Reading called Exeter. So Perkiomen Avenue goes right through where I grew up.
It's so funny when I meet people talking about where they're from in PA, and I remember their school coming up on the snow day list.
Yeah.
Like I remember Exeter coming up. I think Exeter and Boyertown would usually have a similar outcome. Anybody from Scranton, I would get really pissed at because they would always get snow days. You got lots of snow up there.
Yeah. So you're growing up really in Boyertown.
Yeah, mostly. Yep. And to answer your question about authority figures, I was always terrified of authority. Absolutely. I was not rebellious. And, wanting to be liked, that was a really, and it's funny, like it didn't really make me a nice person. It's crazy how wanting to be liked can actually make you selfish towards people. And also realizing how much I punched down, because I wasn't cool. Never, even when we moved, I remember thinking like, this is it, I'll be cool now. And just absolutely not. It's funny thinking of like the shirts I would grab and just think like, yeah, this is a good idea. I'll fit in with this. I was talking to somebody recently who's a teacher of 8th grade, I hated 8th grade the most. And I was saying to her, I wish I could go over the loudspeaker and just say, you all look terrible. Every last one of you, even the cool ones, nobody looks good. You have to grow into your face still. Like, everybody chill. You'll get there, but you're not,
Oh yeah. No. I was like, I'm still under this assumption, even though I know it's not true, but it's still, the thought is always in my head that like, oh, if I wear this thing, I'll finally be cool. I'll finally look cool if I have this t-shirt or whatever, or if I get this jacket, finally I'll be cool. And it's just like, no, Andy, you're middle-aged at this point. This is it. In fact, you're started declining already. So give up all those notions. But no, I remember that. I remember those feelings exactly. I remember being terrified of authority, of also being resentful of authority. It was a double-edged sword. I was terrified and also hated authority and hated someone telling me what to do.
Somebody just spoke on this. Well, not recently, but I was looking for. So basically, again, I'm so resistant to just picking up a philosophy book and reading it. I say I want to, but I'm just afraid that I'm also just not such a good reader in general lately. I think I get through like a page and a half the last few days. My attention span is really waning. But anyway, authoritarianism is something that a philosopher who I have not yet read, but I listened to a podcast that talks about him, which I wonder how podcasts sometimes, what's the word? Podcasts sometimes encourage or not encourage, but I don't want to sound like an insufferable know-it-all because I haven't read Theodore Adorno, but there's a really good podcast that talks about him, and it talks about authoritarianism and how young people are raised with this, authority figures who, especially back, because he was from back in the 40s, I want to say, like he died in the 60s. And he talks essentially about how a lot of people, when they're raised with just responding to punishment so often and being told to identify a particular way, to have this kind of random set of rules enforced on them. Manners was something that they kind of researched. But anyway, that you grow up, a lot of people growing up with this weak ego, essentially. So after childhood, and how people with weak egos tend to drift towards authoritarianism, which then kind of leads them into fascism.
Yeah.
And then he talks about conspiracy theories. It's really nuts how current it felt.
Oh yeah, Adorno's great.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah, you've read him, so you know more than me, and I'm here. I am like, you should be talking about it.
No. I it's been a while since I read any, and I've only really read Dialectic of Enlightenment. But like it's this kind of like I do think about like a lot about like the cultural superego, and again, this goes back to this idea of like all these like traditional ideas of gender or sexuality or race or whatever, are all in this kind of like, to me, the cultural superego, the thing that's like in culture telling us how to behave, is a beer ad. And that beer ad is like traditional everything. It's being on the beach with twins and getting a Miller Lite or whatever. And like, you're like, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do, even though I don't like beer. And like, that looks weird. Like that guy seems to be treating those women like objects. Like, that's strange. I don't want to do that. And like all that kind of stuff. And like, am I supposed to be like strong? Like, am I supposed to like take off my shirt and have a six pack? Cause I definitely don't. And like that thing, that superego has been in my head for a long time. And that's why I'm resentful a lot of authority. And unless authority is telling me to do something I already want to do in the first place, or that I think is good or ethical, I have a lot of problems with authority in general, even as an adult, or even more so as an adult. Because as a child, I just had to do and I'm lucky that my parents are pretty like nice, ethical people. So that like when they told me to do certain things, it turned out to be like things that were beneficial to myself and other people. But like, good. Yeah, that part's good. But like in general, like culture, like mainstream culture tells us awful things. It tells us like murder, like the murder of like foreign people is cool as long as it, because it keeps us safe, and like all these other kinds of things that are actually very harmful to us all. And that's the authority that's like, it's difficult because there's nothing to point to. There's no book. There's no grand book I can read that like, hi, I'm God. Hey, God here. I wrote this book. Obviously not the Bible, but I mean, here's the book of what's true and what's not true. And I can go to this book and be like, oh, so like when culture tells me like bombing a Palestinian village is cool, I know that they're lying to me. You just have to kind of figure this. You just like wander around kind of confused for a long time until you figure out like, oh wait, that's fucked up.
Yeah, I think a lot of people also don't really even get the time or they don't take the time to really think about the values they practice versus, values that are imposed, even values that they actually value, right? I mean, even like what we practice might not even be working with what we value, which is something, I myself have come to see a little more, I suppose.
Do you think you were formed mostly by the time that you moved down to Pennsylvania, you were already kind of formed as a person? Or do you think Pennsylvania changed anything in you or in, who you were as a person?
I mean, quite honestly, I was not formed. No. Because if you're not I wasn't looking at myself through I didn't know how to value myself. So, it's really encouraging to see more young people now who at least seem to have a stronger sense of their own identity. It seems that way. And it's encouraging. It's humbling, really. But no, I very much wanted to be. It wasn't until we moved, and even then, discovering, moving and thinking like, all right, I'll be cool. Went to the Deb, got my things, went to school, and didn't work out. And I was like, well, I'm goth now, so shows you that'll teach y'all. Like, and even then, still not really couldn't really do the makeup. I was a very, I won't say lazy goth, but basically I essentially went, well, I'm weird. I mean to be weird. It's intentional. So you guys didn't win. But I did, my 6th grade art teacher, oh man, bless him. His name was Mr. Butt, Butt.
Oh, that's a tough one.
Yeah, but you know what? He ruled. And he certainly was mocked a bit behind his back, but at the same time, he was respected because he just took no shit. I think he was respected. I hope so. He was a fantastic teacher. He taught AP art, and he encouraged me. I think he was like the first. Well, I guess that was the first time I had like art, like serious art class. I mean, it was 6th grade, so that became a wider and wider avenue to me, art. And then I was really lucky my senior year to have essentially a mentor, Ms. Wagner, who would let me come in during study hall and paint, and is the one who encouraged me to apply to this thing called the Governor's School program, which unfortunately is defunct now. I went in 2003 and I went for creative writing. And she really pushed me and took me seriously, which, I mean, in rural PA, art is not, I mean, most of the money for my school went to the football team.
Yeah.
The art classes were sequestered way off in like the west wing of the school. And I remember one of my English teachers commenting on that. Do you think that's on purpose that they put you guys over there? I think it's on purpose. And thinking about it now, I was like, that makes sense, just keep them off to the side.
Yeah. I mean, that's the stuff that's important in high school. Is football or the sport, whatever sport team your school was good at. So ours was, I think, soccer and volleyball. Those were the ones that Exeter High School excelled at in the late 90s.
Oh, okay.
So they got the attention. I think maybe women's field hockey. I guess there's no men's field hockey. I guess field hockey. But and then you had one or two kids that were good at art, and they painted a mural in the cafeteria, and everyone else was kind of just like, figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, I was one of the couple of kids for sure. It was like a handful of kids. I was definitely in that group. And then my art teacher took me with her. She graduated with a master's from MICA, and she brought me to Baltimore with her and another student. And I immediately fell in love with that city and was just dead set on going to MICA. But yeah, I was really fortunate to have these adults, these authority figures telling me I was good at something and that I should pursue it, something that I liked doing.
Yeah.
I am so lucky that happened to me. I don't think that it might happen more so now. I hope so.
I think people are a little more self-aware because the internet. Well, maybe not so. Some of the people I talk to that are a lot younger than either of us on this show, I think might be a little more self-aware. But like, I don't think culture. I don't think like I remember I talked to someone on the show who is, I don't know, maybe like 15 years younger than me. So maybe about 10 years younger than you. And she's queer. And I was like, oh, well, it must be like, you are so much younger, people are more accepting now. And so, high school must've been a little better. And she's like, no, it was still hell. People still, just because there is, a slightly better acceptance of queer people and culture doesn't mean like the people in my high school weren't, absolute shitheads. This is paraphrasing.
Yeah, especially if you're from the burbs. I mean, even going on tour and being out in the middle of the country and then realizing all of a sudden how the majority of this country Thanks. I mean, it wasn't a shock, but it really was upsetting to see how many white women voted for Trump. Because essentially, I feel like that's speaking to what we're talking about, because to me, it's why on earth would you want to vote for an abuser? And especially how, and I think this speaks to, I mean, when I was listening to that piece about authoritarianism, I just thought, like, man, that is really an attachment to the authority of just how, I mean, how much abuse is still going on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this goes back to like, this is like all these things that we've been talking about, where it's like, where do you find success from? How much do you need authority figures to tell you are good? And how much of that is coming from inside of you? And wherever that meets an equilibrium, I think says whether you will fall into authoritarianism or whether you will be your own kind of person. And
men have always been the authority it wasn't until recently. I mean, two things happened that blew my mind. A few things happened. Number one, I was introduced to the work of Janaya Khan. The Future Khan is their Instagram handle. They're an activist based out of Canada, but they're out on the West Coast. And they said a few things. They said that women are socialized to believe that they deserve whatever happens to them. So that's already an issue. Mm-hmm. That's already really, really wrong. And something I related to. And then they said, and this is like the biggest thing I heard, I think, all year. They said, we do not yet have language to describe the experiences of women of the 21st century. And then they said, we don't even know what being a woman is. And that blew me away. I realized, like, I don't know what it is. It wasn't, I mean, the only books I would read when in high school, I was, obsessed with, I loved Steinbeck, a little later Hemingway, Salinger, dudes. And the men in those books are written with nuance, but the women are all they write women terribly, those authors. I mean, you look back at so many. I mean, I can count the only male author from the past that I think was pretty okay at writing women. I mean, considering is James Baldwin. I mean, I love James Baldwin, and he was one of the few authors I could read that when women characters came in, I wasn't just like, oh, right, of this hysterical or beautiful and mean or ugly and mean, or like they're just very like cartoon characters in a way, people I can't relate to at all. He was one of the few that, did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
And crap, see, but feeling this element, for some reason, I was just so scared to read books by women because I didn't even want to have to identify myself in all of these other ways that women are identified. I didn't want to, even in the beginning when people would call me a female singer-songwriter, or calling Hopalong a female-fronted band, it would annoy me because I felt like I was being just defined by my gender, which, I mean, perhaps, I lost it. I had something and then now it's gone.
Well, I mean, maybe we can get to it through this. Like, do you think like you felt this way even when you were growing up and now you are just kind of like uncovering it? Did you know you felt this way when you were growing up? You didn't even know you felt this way when you were growing up.
Growing up, I thought, because that's why I want to kind of not walk back some of what I just said, but it's just frustrating to be defined by your gender. I think for anybody that shouldn't be the case. I mean, it's a circumstance.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we're born into the bodies that we have. I mean, we're just beginning to learn that they're even like, why is it a binary? Why is that the case of personality? I mean, of like, aren't we learning more and more that all humans are complex and not how can we possibly and women have just been relegated to a very narrow corridor and and you know what, men probably have too, but they certainly are given more agency and room to be individuals. I mean, I was talking to someone about this recently, and we were speaking on those authors, and they said, well, yeah, the men in the books are individuals and the women are, you know, accessories to men.
Yeah. Props.
And so when I was younger in high school, the only thing I knew was that I did not relate to the women I saw in the books I was reading. And so I was just like, well, I'm more like the men. And I'm just going to relate to that. And I want to be referred to as a musician and not have my gender be spoken on. I mean, my first name is very feminine. I mean, you know, culturally, it's Christine. Mm-hmm. When I turned 18 and went away to school, I was given the option of, you know, what name would you like to go by? Which already I was just like, I have a choice. That's my choice. Excuse me. I mean, you know, my name itself felt like a rule. I mean, it felt concrete, but I didn't really identify with it. I didn't know what that meant. I mean, even at 18, I didn't really think maybe I was given the wrong name. I mean, how can you possibly know who an infant's going to become? How amazing that we give kids these names, assuming that they'll be this type of person if we name them this or that. It's just like, it's a title. It's so, and I have a middle name, you know, Frances is my middle name. And I saw one of the young women I was going to be sharing a house with, she went by a nickname, and I was just like, well, I'm going by Frances. And up until very recently, I just thought it was some quirk thing of just, you know, me trying to cut the ties of high school and being uncool. And then I realized, no, I did not identify with the name Christine at all.
Do you think that changed you? That just being able to go by a different name was actually affected a change inside as well?
Yes. I mean, art school, again, you know, having this a lot of time to think has been gnarly at moments, but it's also been incredible to think back and realize how much that opportunity afforded me. That it was school for art, so I was surrounded by people who took what I took seriously, even more seriously. I mean, I was a tiny fish in this big pond of immensely talented and disciplined people. And just even knowing that I could do something like that I could determine my name and people would call me that. I mean, certainly going back home, I would catch some shit for having changed my name. But I hung out with those folks less and less, and I hung around more with the artists who took me seriously. I mean, that was huge. That was massive.
Are your parents pretty traditional, and your stepdad, including him?
I mean, my parents have it's been hard. I love my parents very much. They've again given me huge opportunities. I do think that they're a part of a culture. When I heard you say traditional, I was thinking more, there's certainly, I think more, gender traditional. I think they're definitely part of that whole boys will be boys mindset.
One of the things that I try to figure out on this show is what's the process of someone being pushed to the side of what could have been their fate? like, again, there's nothing against my parents at all, but like, if I would have gone on the path that was prescribed for me, I would have ended up a like accountant or a lawyer or something like that. Right. And there was enough, either like my own weird brain and enough other things that combined to like push me off to the side from that. And if you had, that's why I asked if your parents are traditional, right? If you came from this a pretty traditional household, was it just the like going to an art college that was it being a goth in high school? What was the process of like, oh, I'm not gonna have, whether it's good or bad or not, right? I'm not putting a judgment on that, but like, I'm not gonna turn out like my parents. Was it those things together?
No, my parents are very interesting. They gave me a lot of room actually to, when it came to, I mean, my brother and I were raised differently, but like we were socialized as a boy and a girl. Mm-hmm. And but that being said, I was given lots of space as an artist. I mean, my mom, right behind me, right here, is an etching my mom made. My mom did a lot of etching.
Oh, wow.
70s, 80s, 90s. No, she was the first adult to tell me that I had a skill as an artist. And she told me I was an artist. And that was huge. And certainly her understanding and appreciation and identity of herself as an artist, I'm sure, had influence on telling me that. But I'm so thankful because it saved me. I mean, if anything, I was probably more threatened by my schools. Even, in Jersey, I went to a nicer school, but there was still racism and sexism. Mm-hmm. And certainly the following school I went to, absolutely those things. And homophobia, transphobia. I mean, no, I was actually given a surprising amount of space to, and even, my mom would let me buy stuff at Hot Topic, and I even feel bad about it now because I'm just like, God, all that stuff was so bad. What a waste of money. Like, but she wanted me to have that space because I guess she didn't really feel that so much growing up. And so she wanted us to have, because when you're younger, your clothes and your music are, you don't really have experience yet to add to your identity. So it really is, aesthetic and taste.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember liking Sleater-Kinney and being very territorial about it. Just like anyone who says they like poser, like I like Sleater-Kinney. I mean, no one said that they did, I guess, but like, but just being, I remember being like, this is mine. This makes me-
Totally. Like liking Pavement was like the thing that made me when I was like 14. And when my sister wanted to listen to them, I was like so territorial. I was like, no, this is mine. And which, but like you grow up, but you get a little older and you're like, oh, this is just a thing I like. This doesn't define my person. And like, I mean, there are people who don't ever grow out of that. And those are, dangerous people to be around because they have no sense of self other than their tastes. But yeah, so it really started with your mom. So it's just like, so your mom gives you the space to kind of.
My mom's also supportive. Like she's also a fan, so I don't want to like get too far into, she's probably going to listen to this. So just,
Yeah. So, but that's really where kind of like you had the space to kind of become who you were as opposed to what people were telling you to be or what culture was telling you to be.
I had more space than some other kids probably get. And the fact that I was able to leave and to attend art school is, I mean, that was really massive. I needed to leave. And not just because opportunities but I felt so, I don't know, that there was something in me that knew that I needed to be, I didn't want to be around people who already had a definition of who I was.
Huh.
I didn't want to be, because I took that so seriously. I took other people's perception of me so seriously that I wanted to just start with new people.
Yeah.
And going to art school, so I already had my art to help establish an identity. And thankfully, art school's full of, uh, I guess, yeah, non-traditional people, queer people, certainly people who were likely ostracized, or, and if not ostracized, learn to embrace themselves at a younger age. I mean, I met a lot of people in art school that seemed, again, I want to be careful in assuming so much about others, but to me, they seemed confident in themselves. I mean, the 3 women I was housed with, we went over our essays together, and I thought my essay was unique. But when they went over their essays, I'm like, you guys are weird. Like I'm saying that because their essays were so imaginative, so brilliantly creative and fearlessly creative, that I was intimidated, and yet I was welcomed. I mean, that was huge too. The fact that I was welcomed and not, not mocked for my work. It wasn't until very, very recently that I realized that I have power within myself. I'm 34, and it happened this year.
Wow.
Up until then, I was constantly seeking validation from the outside. So, and even in art school, I mean, that's funny how, you don't, it's amazing how deep some stuff goes. And it's a combination of, I mean, we're still just figuring, I mean, not that we've figured it out yet, but it's wild to me, the advances that we're making, and we still don't really understand the mind at all. And we still think that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. That's insane to me. That, I mean, I never related to that. I was like, where am I on this? Especially, I mean, one of the big things for me was knowing at a very, very young age that I never wanted to bear children. Never. And anytime I would tell people, it still happens where you say that to someone, they go, oh, why not? How come? Like, what's wrong? Because you should. I mean, like, as a woman, and like, oh, you'll change your mind. And I'm just like, no, man, like, I physically don't want to do that. I'm impressed by women who do. I think that, it's cosmic to me that women have that desire. I think it's noble, but I don't understand it.
Yeah, no, my wife and I mean, we've been together for almost 11 years, and like early on, we were both like, we don't want kids. we're like, no, that's not for us. I don't want to keep you any longer, but just one last question. Do you think that, or have you written any songs or painted anything or drawn anything since you made this discovery recently of being more assured of yourself and not needing that outside validation? And if you've made something since then, has it been any different?
As a writer, I do not know how to speak to the moment that we're in. I think, I mean, one thing that I've realized, I mean, this is, I'm not a very good listener. I think a number of people would attest to that. Not a stellar listener. And this year, it seems more imperative than ever that I do listen. I mean, I even worry over some of the stuff I've said to you in this conversation. I wonder the multitude of experiences I'm not considering. Again, as a white woman coming to the revelations that I am, I'm sure there's some ignorance in there. Like I'm so new to a lot of what I'm coming to understand. So songwriting, no, the guitar for me is, a vehicle. I don't mean to say that as a knock against anyone who's really skilled in their craft. I just never became a particularly skilled guitarist. What I love about music, about my work in music, I mean, it's writing melodies, but ones that serve my voice, which is, I have what's the word? Well, anyway, like my voice doesn't lend itself to everything I've found. So I write songs that I know I can sing. Although a song came out this year that was the first time ever that I wrote lyrics to an already existing melody, and that was for Ryan Hemsworth. I'd never done that before, at least not in a very, very long time, if I have. But yeah, like I'm very passionate about lyrics, and I've written a tiny, tiny bit, but I've had to sit with what I've written, and really think about what use it has, because there's even stuff from the past that I worry that I've added harm in what I've written. Yeah.
So it's almost ironic then.
Well, writing stories that aren't mine, and speaking without considering, I mean, on topics like mental illness and racial injustice and trauma that isn't mine. And so I wonder if I'm grateful when people come up to me and tell me that the music I've written has helped them through trauma, or, the lyrics I've written have helped them through trauma. That's massive. And I'm grateful when that happens. But yeah, no, I haven't really written. And I've mostly been drawing and painting. Yeah, it's been incredible I haven't drawn and painted this much since college. And it's a huge part of, it gives me it really feels good to get to do something where I feel like I'm in the place I'm supposed to be doing the thing I'm supposed to be doing. And music just hasn't, that eludes me more. Writing lyrics doesn't. I mean, I do that on my own, and I have I take my time. I, stand behind what I say in the songs, but there's so much that happens after that. And that there's so much that happens after recording and arranging and recording an album with my band that is incredibly rewarding. But, the machine around that, the expectations around that don't really have much to do with those stories or those,
that
other narrative. In fact, that other narrative kind of gets lost in the business. I mean, there's plenty of people that I also enjoy the fact that people who don't care about lyrics at all enjoy our band. That's fun. That's also cool. I mean, the guys are incredible at their craft, and I'm proud of what we make together. But for me, the lyrics are that is where I get my sense of, that's what's the most exciting for me, I guess, in terms of creativity. And I haven't been able to do that lately.
Interesting. Francis?
I guess we didn't really talk much about music. I'm in a weird place, and I had a feeling, when we scheduled this, I knew I was like, I'm going to be in a weird place, but
Yeah. I mean, look, that's not, I don't think asking questions about lyrics or, why'd you go to the A chord here? I don't think that's going to get anywhere anyway. I think the kind of discussion we have is much more fruitful for understanding the art you make.
Oh, I appreciate that. I'm also hoping, I wonder if a lot of people are going through, I've been reading articles here and there about realizations that a lot of folks are coming to, folks that are, again, as fortunate enough to have the time as I have been. Very fortunate to have that time. It's crazy to me realizing that, and by the way, in saying so, I want to acknowledge that this, it's not, again, like being so isolated, am certainly alienated from so many other, or isolated from so many other experiences. And this has been a horrifying experience for so many people. And I certainly wouldn't want, I guess it's weird for me to say that, to speak on being grateful for this time, because it is, a lot of people aren't having any, and a lot of, people have died. I mean, it's horrible.
Yeah, it is okay for you to have your experience, though.
There's room, right? I keep telling one thing I'm trying to, because that's where a lot of the scarcity comes from, is just there's room for people feeling that there's no room.
Don't beat yourself up for existing. I think that's something that I had to, because I remember when I first started therapy and I was like, well, how am I supposed to do comedy? How am I supposed to do a dumb improv show at UCB when we're bombing Somalia? I forget what we were doing. We were doing something fucked. I mean, America's always doing something fucked up, but like, I forget what foreign thing we were doing that was fucked up at the time. But I'm like, how am I supposed to do this? And she's like, well, would not doing that stop that? And I go, well, no. She's like, okay. I mean, don't be a narcissist. Don't be a monster. Don't become a complete narcissist about it. But like, you can have your experience, but your guilt over what else is happening, and do what you can to stop that stuff, right? But there's certain things that are just completely out of your control, and you can't let guilt over that stuff stop you from making things or doing or living your life. Like, if you let that overwhelm you, you're not helping anyone by letting it overwhelm you.
True. I mean, absolutely. There's one last thing I wanted to say, that because it was really important to me, and I wonder if it would be helpful to anyone. It is personal, but I think it could be useful. There was do you follow AOC? Mm-hmm. She posted the day after Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and it was really generous. She at one point said, people ask me, because she was talking about organizing and just the fact that she is so empowering of others, first of all, I think is so generous. And then she said, people always ask me, like, how are you so brave? Like, where does your bravery come from? And she said, I'm scared all the time. And I realized I don't think I've ever heard somebody in my lifetime in a position of power, admit to being afraid. I don't think I've ever heard that. And I thought that was incredibly generous of her. And at one point I said, I hope that people learn to not feel so threatened by a woman who knows her own power. And then I realized that I have never felt my own power. I never felt like that was true. And I started crying. I just sat down and started crying, because it's so, again, to be the age I am now and have bought into this lie for so long, and to see someone else, doing something and being vulnerable. I mean, I think that we misconstrue often what vulnerability is. And I think it's, it is a level of invitation for connection, but it's also, I mean, that's, I guess that's part of how language is still kind of, I struggle with it. I mean, that's the other thing too. It's like, I guess I take it for granted, the gift of language, but I certainly thought I respected it. And I'm now realizing how much of it I've, absolutely taken for granted, and told myself a story about particular aspects of it that really aren't, they call for reexamination.
Frances, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for speaking with me.
This is so, I mean, I'm a huge fan, so I thought this was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks
so much.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye.